Hello and welcome to 5 and 5, where we take time to ask industry leaders questions pertaining to one of 5 topics selected completely at random. I'm very happy to say that we have Vijay Singh with us today. Vijay is the executive producer of Vice Media Group and Virtue Agency. Lovely to have you, Vijay.
Hi, nice to see you again.
All right, let's see what questions we're going to delve into. Bear with me a moment. All right, I'm going to spin the spinning wheel of categories.
Yep, let's go. Change.
Oh, so close.
Memories.
You know what?
That's
I'm not meant to do this. I'm not meant to do this, but let's just see if it's meant to be.
Let's go.
One more.
Yeah. Outside my comfort zone a little bit, but why not?
I've never had someone want one so much.
Change. Is this for good? Well, yeah.
Are you okay with this?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
All right, Vijay. Yeah. What does business for good mean for you?
Well, so business for good is about making real, actual change, like doing something and making a significant impact. Because I think what happens a lot right now, especially with a lot of businesses, is that there's a lot of like tokenism. There's a lot of like people just doing stuff for the sake of doing. And there's a lot of brands who are just jumping the bandwagon and just trying to associate with like global warming or trying to just pretend to be in on the cause when they're not really in on the cause. And it's pretty obvious when you look at some of that work in that it's very shallow. There's no depth to whatever's being conveyed. And then I'm a big believer of practicing what you preach. So if you look at a lot of these brands, like you look at I won't say any brand names here in case get myself in trouble. But if you look at like CEOs of brands and they stand behind these messages and then they just don't practice that. Yeah. They're just not like they're still on their jets and they're still flying across the world. It just doesn't tally up. So I think if you want to stand for something, you have to really put your money where your mouth is. You really do something about it. You really make a significant impact with whatever the action is. So and I think that's important. Yeah.
So what roles do you think brands should play in the world today?
I think more importantly, I think brands shouldn't try so hard because when brands try too hard and they deviate from what they normally do and they try too hard, it just reeks of like bad taste. Like it just ends up looking very like amateurish or just like a lack of sincerity from the brand. So like, it depends what your brand stands for. If your brand stands for something in relation to good, then yes, go ahead, do something good, but don't just try and force fit.
So don't just do it for the sake of it.
Just don't do it for the sake of it, and don't force fit it because it sticks out like a sore thumb. Everybody's gonna laugh at you because that's not what you stand for, and it's gonna be very obvious.
Do you think brands have a responsibility to, if they can and they could use their platform for good, that they should?
Yeah, I don't think brands have a responsibility. Nobody is putting like brands on there's no pressure for any brand, and no brand should ever feel or think that they're responsible for making some kind of change. I think change or like doing good happens more on an individual level. And it's not the task of a brand. It's all up to an individual to make change or to do good or to not do good or to have an impact on the environment or to whatever the cause might be. I think it's work that needs to be done on a personal level. It's not the role of a brand to come in and tell everybody to stop eating meat or tell everybody like cut less trees or use less paper. Like it's not the task of a brand. Like I don't think it is.
I know what you're saying, but I've always thought that real change and a real movement can only happen top down. I think even if all the individuals make changes, then it's so minor. But if there is like a overarching, so if companies like, let's say, like a Unilever or a Johnson & Johnson or a P&G, which are these huge conglomerates, if they are more sustainable, that will have such an impact. And yes, individuals can choose where they put their money, but if all the companies aren't being responsible or trying to in some way help, then it's very hard for the individual to make those changes too.
Well, like the thing about that sort of top-down approach is that it's stuff like it really just most of the time feels really force-fed. Like I hate to say it because it's not a new narrative. It's nothing new. It's like as we've advertising's been around for like decades now.
Yeah.
There's nothing new out there. There's nothing like trying to tell someone to do something is just like mind control. There's nothing new there. And I think as individuals, we need to do the work. We need to dig deeper into ourselves. We need to ask ourselves questions. We need to look at every moment in our lives as with like clear perception, with sort of like an analysis of what we're doing here. With our day-to-day lives, we shouldn't be looking to a brand to tell us like Unilever or Coca-Cola or whatever, tell us like drink less sugar. We need to question ourselves and say like, hey, I don't want sugar in my drink, and I'm not doing it just because all the brands telling me to do this. So I hate to say it, but there's a lot of deception in advertising, and there's a lot of deception because a lot of time people are just playing on bandwagon jumping. People are just playing on manipulation. Brands are playing on manipulation, and we need to get out of that sort of thinking. Brands need to be innovative. Brands need to think 2 steps ahead of the consumer mindset. Brands need to think about like, okay, everybody's talking about global warming. What else should we be having conversations about? What else is out there that needs to be addressed? Let's not just jump on the same Black Lives Matter, global warming. It's just so repetitive.
We need to find new problems.
Yeah, let's find
those
new
problems aren't enough.
No, that's what life is, right? Life is about addressing problems, but not the problem that we're faced with now, but the next problem, the one that comes along 5 years down the road or 2 years down the road. And we need to solve those things. Like what else is out there? like a little kid in Sweden there, Greta Thunberg, is telling us about global. If a kid can tell you that, you don't need a brand to tell you that. Like
I mean, but the point is that I guess there's not been enough done. Is there a brand that you admire?
You're right. There's not enough done, and there's never been enough done. And these conversations have been going on. Like I would say, if you go beyond this, like now, where a lot of these conversations have surfaced because of more like so widespread clarity around it, it's sort of grown out to surface. But if you look at movements like global warming and things like eating less meat, it's been here since the 60s or even way before that. Like hippies, this is what hippies were rallying for. It's just the same conversation. They just evolved. They just gone more into the mainstream. And what's happened is it's gone from like culture into like the mainstream, and it takes decades to go into that stage. So like myself as a kid, I was a punk kid growing up, and we were like as a punk, you're sort of like told to sort of like fight the system,
you were a rebel.
Yeah, kind of. So like the system's there to, like punks there to teach you to beat the system and rebel against that. And and a big part of that was was feminism, was a big part of punk music. Environmentalism was a big part of it. Veganism was part of that. It's all there. If you look at the 60s and 70s, there's all this is in culture already, in this hippie movement, this punk movements, whatever. But it's just taken such a long time to jump into mainstream culture. So anything that comes into mainstream culture needs time to sort of like build in on a subcultural level,
absolutely.
On a grassroots. And that's where brands need to look into. They need to look into more grassroots level, and see like, okay, outside of this like mainstream culture, what on the grassroots level is happening, like um, within environmentalism. Maybe go deeper into it, go find a category in there that you can really address, and speak to the people on the ground who are doing the real work, or like meet the young people today who are like, championing a new cause, or
Mm,
working on new rights, or whatever they might be. There's a lot out there. You'd be
yeah.
surprised.
Tell better stories, basically.
Yeah, tell that story. There's so many of them. There's so much of that. And I'd say like that's where kind of Vice thrives. Or like Vice, we go out there and sort of like dig into the little holes and find what's stories that not have been told before.
True.
And that's where we thrive.
Okay, question for you. Is there, what's your favorite Vice story? Is there one that just really stands out to you as like, we hit the nail on the head with that one?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stories out there. Well, last year, one of the stories that I found really interesting was one of our journalists, Isabel. She went to China, and I can't remember, was it Xinjiang province? So, and it was around Muslim communities there, and how there's a lot of brainwashing going on.
Right.
And again, it's a lot of it's around information that people don't know about, and
Yeah.
how, surveillance society, sort of like having kids learn about Chinese culture or whatever. Like there's a lot of stuff going on beyond our knowledge. And it was
Absolutely.
like, she had like a camera in the bag and snuck into places there. So I was pretty impressed by that, and I think it picked up a bunch of awards, but like got a lot of hype on YouTube, which is really interesting. And then on Virtue, on the agency side that I work on, there's a piece of work that we did in the Nordics, which is really interesting, and it was around. It won at the Cannes Lion, it won an award, and it was called, the campaign was called Address the Future. So a brand called Carlings, I think it's a fashion brand, they launched a capsule for where you could like, you would have infinite, it's like an AR filter where you have like infinite options of clothes you can
Right. Yeah.
wear. So instead of going out and buying
There was a big issue with that, isn't it? That all these sort of influencers and stuff were spending so much money on fast fashion.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
they want to in every photo to look different and have a whole new outfit, and so yeah, I think I saw that when they created a natural filter where you could select clothes and
Exactly.
not
Yeah. Yeah,
impact
so
the
that was a pretty fun one, because you could, you don't need to go, like young people don't really need to go out. They can just play with this filter and use all these like capsule pictures
cool.
from the brand. So the brand's actually gone into like putting some effort into designing the clothes, making them look good, using the right color so that like these people can use it. So that was a really fun one. Yeah, and then right here in Singapore, I worked on an interesting campaign for Unilever, for Dove, around Dove hair. We went to, it was more like a regional campaign around Southeast Asia. So we did a campaign for Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia, addressing sort of how women feel about their hair, and nobody talks about this stuff. Like there's always this perception of like, oh, women in Asia need to have like long, straight black hair, and it needs to look straight, it needs to be like well kept. But we went around and met people from different regions of Philippines, and then they all had a different sort of like perception of what beauty is, right? Some people, curly hair is beautiful, or big hair is beautiful. And then in Indonesia, what was interesting was that we spoke to women who wore the hijab, and people think like, well, you would think that like a woman who wears a hijab doesn't really care about her hair, but she puts so much thought into that, about how it's kept underneath the hijab, and also like how when she goes home, how her family feels like when she removes the hijab, like how they perceive her, and it's always like back of their mind. So
Fascinating.
yeah, so again, around perceptions of how women feel about their own hair, like a lot of times, like women's ideas about their hair are shaped by society, about what's in mainstream media, what you're seeing in magazines, on Instagram and stuff. But there's a lot more that goes on, and it's actually varying depending on where they live, in which province in Philippines they're from, or or who they are, or like a dark skin, fair skin, big hair, whatever. Like there's a lot of ideas there.
A whole world of of interest
it's a
there.
whole world of, yeah.
Well, I'm glad
It's
you had a little insight into the women's hair and what we think.
and it was actually pretty interesting because I learned a lot. Like men don't know this stuff. Men need to learn about this stuff too.
Dove are always pushing boundaries in sort of the perception of beauty and you know what is real beauty and what that means to people. And I used to work with them, and
Cool.
I've always been super impressed with the work they do. So I can imagine.
That was pretty fun. I had it was a big learning experience for me. Like we're all really just ignorant. We don't know what happens in all these different places in the world, and there's a lot to learn from like a small province in the Philippines or
and the thing is, they're all different, but at the end of the day, there are universal truths. People just want to feel accepted and feel beautiful, and they don't because of societal norms and you know, these things that we put on people. So like you said, it's we can learn a lot from it, and it's good to talk about it. Sure.
Yeah.
That's all we have time for today.
Oh, excellent.
It's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you very much. And all the best on your new adventures, like whatever comes along for you next.
Thank you very much. This has been 5 and 5.
All right. See ya.